right, let's call this meeting to order. This is the March 11th, 2019 meeting of the San Luis Park School Board. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to have a crowd. So first up, we're going to do the spotlight, which is the Winter Athletic State Competitors, Nordic Ski Team, and the Boys Swim Team. I'll just let that begin. Andy Ewald, who's our Director of Athletics. If I've got your title wrong, please correct me, Andy.
You are correct. Thank you. Thanks for having us here tonight. We're going to start with Nordic Ski, and I'm going to ask John Dicey, one of our Nordic Ski coaches, to come up and talk for a little bit.
Thank you, Andy. So I'm here tonight to honor one of our skiers that made it to the state meet this year. And I've just got a couple of things to say about Emmett. Won't take long. So Emmett's been a member of the Nordic Ski Team for the past 5 years, having joined the team as an 8th grade middle school student. And he developed into a great skier and led the team as a captain through his commitment to goals. One of those goals was competing at the state meet, which he accomplished this year. So most people in sport will know Emmett as an athlete, a runner, and a Nordic skier, yet Emmett is also a highly skilled musician. Over the past 10 years, Emmett's committed himself to his musical passion and has developed into a highly accomplished violinist. He is a concert master in the school orchestra and the chamber orchestra. He plays for the highest orchestra of the Greater Twin Cities Youth Sympathy, has traveled internationally with the orchestra to Germany, Poland, and Hungary, and he has brought that same level of energy and commitment to the Nordic Ski Team, something he shared with his teammates. I'd like to introduce you to Emmett Foner.
Could Emmett's family just stand up quickly too, please? Just wanted to thank you for all your support and everything you've done supporting him and our Nordic program, so thank you. Our boys swim coach, Amanda Forsberg, will be up next.
So I was just going to highlight a little bit some stuff from our season. So the boys had a phenomenal season. I wish they could all be here because I thought they all did a phenomenal job throughout the course of the year. We finished second in the conference to Chaska Chan, who finished second at state, and that was our only dual meet loss. And at sections, we finished third behind Hopkins and Edina, and Edina was the eventual state winner. So I think for us, considering our pretty much two main losses were from number 1 and 2 in state, I have no problem with that. I had 4 guys compete at state this year. I had a medley relay of Luke Anderson, Max Bechtold, Will Schwietering, and Hayden Zheng. And they broke our team record with a time of 1:36.6, and their time would have placed them 7th, and they finished 9th, just the way that swimming works. Hayden also competed in the 100 breast and 200 IM. He won them both, and he actually broke the state record in the 100 breast, and he's only about a second away from the national record. So, and he's a sophomore, so I'm very excited. But they're all sitting over there if they wanted to stand or come up here, I'm guessing. Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's got a step hard, Nancy, you have to.
And same thing, if their parents or families could stand up and just be recognized for all the time and energy and hard work they put in and the support they give as well. So thank you. Thank you. Spotlight people, you don't need to stay for the rest of the board unless you want to.
But we do thank you for coming down and letting us celebrate your success, because that's part of what makes this work so much fun, is sharing your fun. All right, so next up on the agenda, we have approval of the agenda. And on tonight's agenda, we have the following. We have the superintendent's report. We have several study session topics, beginning with selection of the audit firm, the Maxfield housing study presentation, strategic plan report, strategy 4, start end times. Then we have communication with the school board. We have board professional development. We have policy development, first reading of several policies. We have the consent agenda and the action agenda. On the action agenda, we have one item, the audit firm selection, followed by communications and transmittals and adjournment. We have a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Second. Second by Ann. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Supported. 7-0. All right. First up is the superintendent's report.
All right. Good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. For my report this evening, I would just like to highlight a couple of items connected to our strategic priorities. This past week was Paraprofessional Appreciation Week. In St. Louis Park, we have over 167 paraprofessionals who work extremely hard every single day to help our students actualize the mission here in St. Louis Park. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge them here at the board meeting. As often, they don't get the proper recognition for all of the work that they do for our students and families here in St. Louis Park. So while the week has passed, it was last week, March 3rd through the 9th, I wanted to take this moment this evening to acknowledge them and to thank them publicly for everything that they do for our students and families. We had a student who qualified for the 2019 National Geographic Minnesota State Geography Bee. As you know, that this is an extremely high accomplishment. He's one of 100 students to qualify for the state competition, which will be held on March 29th at the University of Minnesota. And the winner of this competition will receive a cash prize, and I don't know exactly what that cash prize is, and a trip to Washington, D.C. to compete for the national competition in mid-May. So if you know are familiar with his accomplishment, please feel free to give him congratulations when you see him. And lastly, I would just like to take a moment to highlight some of the spring and summer projects here in the district. We are actually starting today here at the high school with our locker room facilities project. When you came in, you may have seen in the parking lot in the old district office entrance, they're starting to stage there. I believe tomorrow that area may be fenced off, and they're going to start working on the locker room project, also working on the former district office to try to get those spaces ready for the start of next school year. We will also begin the work at the middle school in May on the media center. And this summer, we'll be doing work at Aquila and continuing the work at Cedar Manor. So all of the projects are on schedule thus far, on budget, and we're really excited about the progress that we're making connected to all of the construction projects. And whenever I get an opportunity, I just like to thank our community for their continued support and the successful passing of our $100.9 million bond referendum last year, which allows us to move this work forward here in St. Louis Park. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you. So first up on our study session topic is selection of the audit firm. And that'll be presented by Patricia Magnuson, our Director of Business Services.
Good evening, Chair Gores, Superintendent Osai, and members of the board. Back in February, the district requested proposals from 6 audit firms, and we chose audit firms that were members of the Minnesota Association of School Business Officials to send our proposal to. All 6 of the firms responded, so initially, right out of the gate, we thought that was good news for the district and a very good response. We had phone conversations with the audit firms and reviewed their proposals in depth. And in the end, we chose the firm Molloy, Montague, Karnowski, and Radesevich. MMKR, I will be calling them from now on. They are known as MMKR. They had competitive pricing. They had a great depth of metro area experience, many metro area districts that they're currently working with. They had a depth of questioning of our staff in our phone conversation that made me understand that they wanted to understand that their proposal was accurate and reflected what we would need and the strengths that we had and the weaknesses that we might have as a staff. And they also exhibited a commitment to having staff of color serve on the team that would serve in the district on the audit. Those were very important to us. We have really great audit firms in the state of Minnesota, and MMKR stood out to meet the needs of St. Louis Park at this time. And tonight I have Jim Eichten here, who is a partner with MMKR, who will tell you a little bit about their firm.
Members of the board, thanks, Patricia, for the introduction. My name is Jim Eichten. I'm with MMKR CPAs. You can see that I use that lingo appropriately given the name of our firm. You did a great job with that. I'm the managing partner actually with the firm. I'm here this evening to provide a brief presentation of what our firm is about and what we do with our school district clients. Again, my name is Jim Eichten. I've been with the firm this is my 30th year. I've been working with local governments for all of this time. Our office is actually located in St. Louis Park, actually in the Associated Bank building, which is kind of near the west end. I've been with the firm for 30 years, and I've actually been going to the same location for all of that time in the city of St. Louis Park. Our firm is very committed to the governmental sector. We have been in business for over 60 years. We work solely, most of our firm works solely with governmental entities. It represents about 60% of our practice. We have over 100 local governments that we work with, mostly here in the metropolitan area. We have 4 full-time governmental partners that work solely in the governmental field. You'll find, if you look at proposals that were provided, that's unusual to have 4 individual partners. Most have 1. That work in that space. So we're well known. We are a year-round practice, so even though we only audit once a year, we generally are open to services and questions year-round. We feel that's an important aspect of our firm, given that things are happening on and on all the time. It's not just a one-time look at your audit. It is a year-round process. Our experience in governmental auditing is second to none, really, here in the state. We have expert knowledge in the various governmental accounting standards. If you're familiar with governmental accounting standards, there has been a plethora of new standards the last several years, from GASB 68 to 74 to 75. There's more coming. And with our expertise and with the 4 partners we have, we certainly are very familiar with those particular standards. We also are dedicated to our service with the standards. Certainly with having such a large practice, we spend most of our time at the office looking at standards, really getting information out to entities on the new standards. You'll find that we also take a leadership role in the governmental accounting community. I, as well as a number of my partners, spend time doing presentations. The annual accounting and finance conferences we attend and provide presentations to. I'm also very active in the CPA profession. I've been a member of the AICPA Council, which is our national council of CPAs, as well as the Minnesota Society of CPAs. I was the past chairman of their board which was about 5 years ago. I spent 6 years on their board as well. We do have, as Patricia mentioned, a large number of metro area school districts. You can see them listed here. There's some that aren't even listed. We also work with the intermediate district of all 3 intermediate districts in the metropolitan area, one of which you're a member of, Intermediate District 287, is also a number of our clients. We are very familiar with the various activities, as Patricia mentioned, the funds that you use in the operations of the school district. One other aspect I want to provide is, given the number of school districts we work with and given the expertise we have, we also have a very efficient audit process. We try to provide a environment that is minimal disruption. It is a disruptive process for sure. It is an audit. You are going through an audit, so we don't want to avoid any necessary and required procedures. But we do put an emphasis on providing an audit that provides minimal disruption overall. We provide worksheets and deliverables to your staff that can be used that are efficient. I know when we talked to Patricia, that was one of the highlights of our presentation, that we were able to provide some worksheets that were useful not only with the district but also entity-wide for your organization. We are committed to quality. We do get an external peer review of our operation and our firm. We have a strict review process that we go through internally that is important to our firm, as well as to overall processes from the federal government to the state government. We also are proud of our fact that we've worked with a number of districts to comply with the Certificate of Achievement program that's sponsored by MASBO. Our firm, over the 60 years that we've been in existence, has never failed to achieve getting a certificate for one of our school districts. So a long-term goal of the district might be to work towards a Certificate of Achievement in that area. Again, we are more than a CPA firm as well. We very much find it important to have a year-round resource to you. We provide a lot of consulting services, including some human resource aspects, payroll-related items if they're needed. But lastly, I think most important to the board, you'll find that we provide a very insightful management report. If you've had an opportunity to review the proposal I put in front of you, there's an example of that management report that's in there. I personally will be back here to provide this presentation. I will follow that management report because it's an excellent tool to provide and communicate the results of the audit. You'll find that you'll receive that report in advance of your meeting, well in advance. You'll be able to see and review that report, which is a much simpler report to review, considering that the audit report is probably 100 pages long. And you'll be able to review that quickly and be able to ask me questions that are insightful as part of our presentation. So if you get an opportunity, take a look at that particular document that's in the proposal. Again, we have a long list of satisfied clients, as you can see. Patricia, I'm sure, called a number of them that were provided as part of our presentation. Lastly, we do find our firm to be, albeit one of the largest providers of governmental audit, we are considered a regional or smaller firm. You will get amazing service from us. Without question, you are very important to our practice and our governmental practice, and we find it very important that every client is satisfied specifically in this area. So that's not me. I don't want to go too far. With that, I'll open it up to any questions that you have regarding the audit process.
I really appreciate the thoroughness of your presentation, and I am the liaison to the West Metro Education Program, which your firm is helping us with the wind down process.
Yep.
And
I consulted with a partner today on that.
Yes,
actually.
and so the 3 audit presentations I've sat on with that entity have been exceptional, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again for coming here. I'm really excited that you guys are a St. Louis Park company. It's always nice to stay connected. This question may be best for Patricia. If you could answer this one, Patricia, just to weigh in, the Financial Advisory Committee did also review this proposal, and could you just tell us whether they had any objections or concerns?
The Finance Advisory Committee did not review the separate proposals. They reviewed the worksheet and showed their support then for the analysis that we did and presented to them. So the worksheet is in the board packet as well.
Right, sorry for misspeaking, right, they reviewed that.
Yes. And they showed support for the decision that we were bringing to you tonight.
And, Patricia, kind of taking a step back, so Baker Tilly has served us for several years now, done a good job for us, and just kind of give us some background on, why we went through this process. I'm certainly aligned with this recommendation, but just kind of take us through how we started this process.
The reason we started, I would say there's two reasons. One is that we have been with the same audit firm for many years, and it's always good to just check the marketplace, and wanted to be sure that we had good pricing and that we were looking at the best fit for St. Louis Park at this time. So it was, and I think it generally happens when someone in my position comes into a district new. It's probably not surprising for the standing auditor that a proposal would be sought. So that's why we started the process, and Baker Tilly has done a fine job for the district and did submit their proposal as well.
Thank you.
We'll get to this on the action agenda, but I just want to commend you for the process and for having us take a look and see if we could do better, and it looks like we can do better, so thank you.
Thank you.
And Jim, I'll make the same invitation to you as we made to our students and their families. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. And we're not going to be offended. So next up, we have the Maxfield Housing Study presentation. And that is going to be by Matt Mullins from Maxfield Research. You find your way there? Thanks, Max.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Mullins with Maxfield Research. I'm here tonight to kind of hit some of the highlights for the St. Louis Park Housing Study we completed later in 2018. Find our slides. Oh, there we are. So we were engaged by the City of St. Louis Park about late 2017 to update a previous housing study we completed for the city back in 2013. And that came out about from the Southwest LRT analysis that we worked on across the whole LRT line for future development opportunities around the future transit lines. So we began work with the City of St. Louis Park on, establishing some benchmarks as to what is the need for housing and housing development in the city over the next, say, 10, 20 years and beyond. So tonight I'm just going to kind of touch on some of those findings. I think, the demographics especially, I think, are unique because the demographics really drive housing demand, and in turn, that's really going to, provide some implications for future growth in the school district as far as enrollment and whatnot. So there's a lot of data in the housing study. I'll try to keep it simple as far as some of the analysis, but we'll kind of touch on some of the highlights of the report. So kind of kick things off, looking at the demographics. Of course, your St. Louis Park being a post-World War II community, huge run-up after the war, and then things plateaued in about 1970, and things fell off, just kind of fell flat. But recently, we've had this big resurgence in growth again. Due to the multifamily apartment boom that we're seeing. As you drive around town, there's no shortage of construction cranes and new developments, and St. Louis Park has really been one of the leading communities in the metro area in regards to the new luxury apartments that are being built today across the metro. St. Louis Park has certainly captured a large share of that market demand. So we're seeing some strong population growth this decade and into next decade as well. And the challenging part is, with St. Louis Park being an inner-ring community, is of course land and finding development opportunities for infill and redevelopment. So we'll kind of touch on some of that down the road. But big picture, St. Louis Park has surpassed Met Council projections due to all the growth that we've had in the multifamily industry. We've really surpassed Met Council projections already, and we continue to see that occurring over the next decade or so. But when we look at that growth today, you'll see by age cohort where that is. Now today, we'll say 2017, 2018, millennials born in really the 80s and 90s are the largest demographic today in St. Louis Park. However, if we look at growth trends, similar to other areas across the metro area and across the country for that matter, you'll notice that the aging of the baby boom population is here, and a lot of that growth is occurring in the 55 plus demographic moving forward. But as we look at household types, what's really unique to St. Louis Park is, as we compare St. Louis Park to other communities, is the number of people living alone. 40% of households in St. Louis Park today are one-person households. Pretty high number. Whether that's millennials or baby boomers, it's substantially higher than the metro area Hennepin County trends. At the same time, if we combine one and two-person households together with that, nearly 3/4 of households in St. Louis Park today are one or two-person households. So a lot of people living alone or coupled up, and you'll see in that graph that married with couples, it has gone up a little bit this decade, but it's still a pretty small number compared to other, types of household types. But looking at the income, so income is our leading indicator for affordability. St. Louis Park is, I'd say, very strong household incomes, very on par with the metro area and Hennepin County as far as median incomes. But you see that the growth tends to be in the 45 to 54-year-old age cohort. And many of those are couples where you have the highest incomes. And of course, it wanes from there as people age and start to retire. But overall, we see incomes are rather strong. And I'd say renter incomes on top of that are pretty strong as well, which is really led by, again, all this new apartment construction we're having today, which is what we call lifestyle renters. They're choosing to live in these high luxury, high buck apartments, and they have very healthy incomes that come with that. Jumping over to employment, St. Louis Park, major importer of jobs, which is very positive. You have a huge inflow of people coming into St. Louis Park daily who are spending dollars, retail dollars, shopping dollars locally through the community, and it's a very positive indicator for the local economy. But with that, as we look at numbers, only about 8% of St. Louis Park residents actually work in St. Louis Park. So Minneapolis is clearly the number one place where people are commuting to, i.e. downtown Minneapolis, for a lot of the St. Louis Park residents. As I mentioned earlier, multifamily construction has really been the driver across St. Louis Park, and this graph just kind of illustrates that. You'll see, single-family construction is really very nominal, led really by teardowns and infill development. So prior to the recession, about 2000, 2005, you'll see in that chart the multifamily units that were built. A lot of those were condos or townhomes or some senior housing. And then, of course, the recession came and nothing got built for many, many years. And then since about 2012 plus, we had this huge resurgence of new development again. And that's, for the most part, it's almost all apartments. The condo market has just not come back yet due to a variety of factors. And it really just is being led by the multifamily industry, whether it's senior housing or apartments or affordable apartments. And that trend is here to stay, at least in the short term. There's a lot of product in the pipeline today for new apartment construction. So now we're going to kind of just touch on some of the various housing product types in St. Louis Park as far as, how they're performing. and where the need is for various housing products. So we'll touch with the rental housing market. So we consider a healthy rental housing market about a 5% vacancy factor. In St. Louis Park, we inventoried over 8,000 units, so a lot of apartments, and the vacancy rate was about 2.5%. So with a low vacancy rate like 2.5%, that indicates more need or more there's pent-up demand, so to speak, just for apartments, just due to that extremely low vacancy rate. And as we look at the stock of the product, we certainly have a lot of older 1950s, 60s, 70s rental housing stock that today is what we call quote-unquote affordable, just due to this old, it was built 30, 40 years ago, has not been updated maybe, and has a lower rent structure just due to the age of the building. We call it naturally occurring affordable housing. So about 50% of existing market rate stock today is what we call naturally occurring affordable. So the challenging part is, as we go forward, how do you maintain that affordability without, keep, say investors purchasing the assets and, upgrading the building and raising rents. So that's, one challenge going forward as to how to maintain that affordability. But as we look at, the affordable subsidized product types is pretty much, no vacancies for the most part. You can't get a unit that's has income guidelines just due to the pent-up demand for that type of unit and a long waiting list. So looking at the senior housing market now. So senior housing, just, big picture, that encompasses anything that's age restricted, and that runs the whole spectrum of something with no services, could be just like active adult, senior condo, independent living, assisted living, memory care, etc. So St. Louis Park certainly has a good supply today of senior housing, but very, very low vacancy rates, even a lower vacancy rate for senior housing than we had for the apartment sector. So we're at a sub 2% vacancy rate. And for senior housing, we like to see about a 7% vacancy rate. So just right there again, we have pent up demand for senior housing product types to, attract up to older adults who may need services. And moving over to the for sale market, this is a little bit outdated as far as pricing, but 2018 kind of set the new high bar here in St. Louis Park for the for sale market. We hit about 280-ish, low 280s for median sales price in 2018, which is the new peak in the real estate market. And so far right now, through the first 2 months of 2019, we're holding it. It's still holding that number right now. So we'll see where this goes. And we see 2019 being another, looks to be a pretty strong year in the real estate market. The big challenge is just lack of inventory and just nothing available in the market for people who want to buy. There continues to be this gap, so to speak, in the marketplace for that, say, sub $250,000 or sub $300,000 price point. But looking at, how St. Louis Park compares to the adjoining cities. We look at Hopkins, Golden Valley, Plymouth, etc., Calhoun area. St. Louis Park is more affordable than most of the adjoining communities. Hopkins is a little more affordable, but all the other communities have higher price points of homes, so you are a more affordable housing stock than the adjoining surrounding communities. Again, as I kind of touched on this real briefly about the inventory, but as we look at the inventory of homes for sale today, it continues to be a low supply of homes. And, there's a lot of reasons for this today. A lot of the 55 plus community is not selling their homes today for a lack of product or lack of a place to go, so to speak. So they're holding back a lot of the homes in the market today. And there's just still some say hesitancy for some of the demographics as far as the market at the peak today, people are holding off buying as well. But we still have a lack of supply for homes today in the marketplace, and we expect that to continue here in 2019. It's not, we don't see a whole lot of movement happening with the supply side this coming year. New construction typically is tear downs, infill developments, high price point. You're going to be at least 550, 600,000 plus. That's probably the low end now for new construction for tear downs. There's strong demand for this product type, but it's going to be pretty small number of homes that are going to be through the tear downs, less than 10 a year. But the condo market still has not come back, just due to some reasons that with the state, as far as state statutes. Some of the laws just recently changed, but the condo developers are still not developing new condos in the suburbs right now. So most of it's just downtown Minneapolis or say downtown Wayzata. So we don't see, at least right now, the condos really coming back, at least in the short term. So looking at what's out there today. So as we look at what's in the pipeline, a lot of apartments, and it continues to be the theme here. As we look at the number of recent apartments that have been completed, 600 plus recently. We only have one right now under construction, the Elmwood. That was the former Legion site, American Legion site, yep. And then, but it's the plan pending proposed that's out of this world right now. We have a lot of product that's still in the pipeline, whether that's concept stage, speculation, and there's more than this. I mean, I just know anecdotally talking to other developers or looking at sites, there could be 5 more projects on this list that are really kind of out there right now. So we see a lot of activity in the apartment sector in St. Louis Park. Now, when these apartments are built today, again, they're targeting millennials and the 55 plus, 65 plus population. They're not necessarily building 3 or 4 bedroom units that target the families with kids. So they're definitely targeting that 1 or 2 person household. Apartments just cost. I mean, you could not build an apartment today and charge an affordable rent for what the cost would be for those units. This chart just shows, again, all the new construction that's happened recently in the multifamily sector. I think, as things progress in 2020, those numbers could be higher again. But we do see a slowdown occurring next decade. Just sooner or later, this apartment boom is going to have to level out with increased vacancy rates and concessions. So after we collect all the data on all the properties and the demographics, we put together some forecasts as to what the need is in St. Louis Park for housing and where that's going to be over the next, say 10 years or so. And you'll see, and again, a lot of this is demographic driven again. A lot of senior housing demand. Continued rental housing demand is strong. But we do find a lot of for sale housing demand. It's been multifamily, whether that's townhomes, condos, twin homes. But again, we need to find those sites. And the for sale single family market is probably just going to continue at 8 to 10 tear downs per year, give or take, as that's just going to let the market dictate where that goes. But as we look at the rental market, continued strong demand for rental housing. And these numbers are subtracting out all that product type I just showed you, that previous slide, of all that's planning proposed. So we've accounted for those units, assuming they're going to go forward. So this is after those units were built. We still have pretty strong demand for rental housing. If you go to the senior housing market, still strong demand for senior housing. That's demographic driven. It's just going to be a huge demand for senior housing in the next 5, actually I'd say the next 15 years for that matter, as that's going to continue to grow. As we look to the recommendations, single family housing is just due to lack of land, again, it's going to be all tear downs for the most part. Multi-family housing, we see strong demand, over 1,000 units of demand for, it could be, like I said, twin homes, townhomes, row homes, cottages, condos. But most likely it's probably going to be condos just because we need that density. We need density to make a project work in St. Louis Park just due to high land costs. So most of these projects are most likely going to be the condo concepts or senior cooperatives. Looking at rental housing, we can see, again, strong demand regardless of income. That's market rate affordable subsidized. And really almost any kind of senior housing is in demand, whether that's no services to assisted living, memory care, etc. So just kind of sum up our findings. We see continued strong growth in St. Louis Park. And projections are higher than my console. Growth is going to be strongest with the 65 plus demographic, at least in the next 5 years or so. We still have a high number of persons living alone, and that's not going to change anytime soon. We're a good job importer. We still have a lot of what I call affordable market rate housing, and the challenging here part is just how do we maintain affordability as we don't lose these to high-end housing. The senior housing market, as we touched on, is poised for strong growth. We see, again, the for sale market's at the peak. I think 2019 is going to be a good year, but eventually the for sale market needs to slow down because housing costs are just increasing much higher than the wages are. And, just kind of big picture comment, being a first ring burb with very high acquisition costs. So redevelopment costs substantially more in St. Louis Park versus say going further 2, 3, 4 burbs out. Hence, overall housing costs come up when you have those high acquisition costs. And it gets more and more challenging to bring an affordable housing concept to the market that isn't, priced way up here. And I'd say the St. Louis Park does a fantastic job of providing housing programs, whether it's, live in the park, whether it's, fix-up funds. They have a lot of programs in the toolbox that most communities don't have. So I think the city has done a fantastic job with what they have and promoting a variety of housing product types in the community. So they've done, it's at the high bar, so to speak, across the metro area when it comes to housing programs. So that's just a, high-level overview of the housing study we did. It's about 200 pages long, so we just tried to bring it down a little bit. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about, housing in St. Louis Park and how it may affect future school board. Yep, go ahead.
This is a question, but I was reading today that St. Louis Park had the highest percentage growth the last 4 years of any inner ring suburb. So that indicates you're popular. I guess the question is, can you remind me your definition of affordable housing? And is that the same definition that the city uses when they require a certain number of affordable units?
Yeah, so affordable housing is a very subjective term. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. We generally define affordable housing as anything 50 to 60% of the area median income. So when you take like a one-person household, two-person household, it's already established by HUD and Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and they put together parameters for, a family of 4 at 60% should be like $90,000 or whatever that would be. They establish those. So, however, affordable housing means a lot of different things. Affordable housing could be 80%, 90%. some people call workforce housing affordable housing. That could be 80% up to 120, even 140% of AMI in some cases. So it's a subjective term. We like to generally say that housing is affordable at 60% to AMI, or another term we use is housing is affordable at 30% of your adjusted gross income. Those are just kind of some generic ballparks. But if you look at rental housing, we go off the 60% of the area median income as kind of the benchmark, so to speak, for affordable housing. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a lot of moving parts in St. Louis Park right now, and there's a lot of demand, and then there's supply happening in certain areas. And can you speak to implications for our school district? Can you speak to what places do you see, sort of in the big picture, affecting the market for families with children?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the demographics, obviously, you have a lot of people living alone, not one and two person households. And the reality is today, societal changes, especially in inner ring burbs, just, I'm talking all the inner ring burbs, lower birth rates, people may no longer get married, all the societal trends that are happening that are delaying, having kids, and people are having fewer kids. Hence, we are, demographically up against a headwind, so to speak, because for the most part, if you look at St. Louis Park's demographics today and your birth rates against, we're not producing enough kids, fertility-wise, for a growing school district down the road, if you look at those fertility rates. So the question is, how are you going to grow, that's a societal question that's affecting more than just, nationwide. So that has major implications there. So I think, demographically, looking at these trends, especially for the millennials, it's like, okay, so millennials are going to age, they're going to get married, they're going to have kids, are they going to stay in St. Louis Park or not? I know this is one thing the City Council has grappled with, is how do we keep people in St. Louis Park as they get bigger families, and they need bigger households, and they've tried to implement a lot of housing programs to help keep people in St. Louis Park to add on to their house, or provide incentives to keep them in town so they don't move out to Maple Groves or Plymouth or whatnot for the bigger households. But I think, as I look at those, the numbers, those apartments being built, I mean, the reality is they're going to be millennials. And most of them are going to be 25, 30, maybe up to 35. And the question is, how do you keep them in St. Louis Park as they age? And I think that's going to be the grappling question, is what happens as those millennials get married? Do they stay or do they move out? So I think that, to me, that's the big takeaway as I look at those numbers, because that's a lot of apartments being built. And these apartments, like I said, are not being built for families. They're being built for single people.
Yeah, thank you. You've sort of illustrated what I see in my own block. A lot of single people living in their homes, not moving out because they don't have a lot of choices. They're older, and then when they, health-wise, we've had 2 houses are going to open up because of health reasons. They stayed so long, now they have to go somewhere else. But the question is, who moves in? Is it a couple that's in their 60s looking for their smaller retirement home, they're downsizing from Maple Grove, or is it going to be a young family that's going to move in and become part of our school district? And it'll be interesting to watch that shift over time with the demographics here.
Yeah, I mean, as I could speak as a former resident of St. Louis Park, who's lived in pretty much everything, as I've lived in an 800 square foot single family home, the owner before me had a family of 6 in that 800 square foot home. That just shows you how, times have changed. I mean, today, people couldn't fathom a family of 6 living in there, but a couple generations ago, everyone did, So I think there's a lot of societal trends going on like that.
Well, thank you. We appreciate
All right,
very
well,
much you
appreciate
taking the time, and I really appreciate your condensing 200 pages
Well,
down to 20 minutes.
I could
Thank
go on
you.
all night, so okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I wish you and the city well as they grapple with this. So next up, we have our strategic plan report, strategy 4 start times. We have, I'll let those folks introduce themselves, but I can tell you we've got a great group of people that have been working on this project for some time, and tonight's the night we get to hear their good thinking and their hard work, and I'll say thank you at the start for everything you've done, and I'll say thank you at the end. We really appreciate all the time and effort you've all put into this.
Good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. For the start in time recommendations presentation, I have the honor of just introducing the group. And I would like to first start off by thanking the START team members that are in the room that are presenting tonight, those that are watching. As I shared with them during our last meeting, their investment in our school district and in our students and our families it really reminded me why I moved to St. Louis Park 8 years ago. I continue to be impressed by the community members and the parents in this district and just their general overall support of our students. So thank you all. I know that coming together multiple times throughout the course of the past several months in the evening, spending time with Andy is not the best thing in the world to do, but you all did it. So I'm just joking, Andy. But you all did it, and I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here tonight to share information about the process and all of the work that we've done. So what you'll hear tonight is we'll spend time reviewing the charge of our work, why we came together. We're going to spend some time talking about, just a brief amount of time, talking about our current start times in transportation. Members of our team will share some of the research and local data that we gathered through the process. And throughout this process, we spend a tremendous amount of time getting input and feedback from community members. So you'll hear a little bit about that as well. And we'll get to a point in which we'll ultimately share the recommendations that we'll be proposing to you and that we'll be asking you all to take action on. What I will ask is that you hold your questions to the end, and at that time, as a team, we'll respond to those questions accordingly. As I mentioned before, what really impressed me about this group and what continues to impress me about this group is their commitment to the promises of our mission, and what you'll hear as we're going through the different stages of our work this evening is a continued focus on student achievement and student overall health and well-being. And that really impressed me about this group because our focus stayed squarely on our students in this school district. The last piece that I'll mention before I turn it over to Sarah is that the work that we did here was directly connected to our strategic plan. One of our results this school year was to develop and to complete a start in time study. And I'm impressed by the process that we conducted, which you'll hear more about. And I'm thankful for each of the members of the team that were willing to invest their time to participate. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk a little bit about the methodology that we used and the process.
Thank you, Superintendent Osai. I am very excited to be here tonight. I have a large group with me, and so the way we're going to conduct our business is that as we each take turns with our part of the presentation, we're going to introduce ourselves and talk about our connection to the district, our personal why of why we are so invested in this work, and then we've got a lot of really great information to share with you tonight. So I'm going to start with the methodology and how we did our work. So we implemented a new process this time called the TOP, or Technology of Process. Focused conversation method. So it's a sequence of conversations. It uses the Audit method, and it really dives deep into not only the external or the actual factual data, but it also dives into gut check, feelings. How do you feel? How do other people feel? And then uses all of those feelings to get to a decision. So that's a process that's new in St. Louis Park that we used for this work. I want to take you just through the timeline. So you've seen and heard from me a lot over the past few months, but I'm certain that there's also people who are just now starting to get familiar with the process. So we wanted to just kind of walk through, how did we get here tonight? Where did this come from? So as the superintendent mentioned, this is part of our strategic plan and a strategic plan result to be achieved this year. And with that, we started our work in October, where we advertised, we recruited, we had an application process. All of these members applied, and we did our best to select a project team that was representative of all of our stakeholders. So we had members on every school, we had members from every program, all of the different demographics in the school district were represented. We had 4 meetings, November, December, and also February, March, with 2 rounds of communications and engagement with people. So we did an input where we were asking, how do you feel? What do you think? Just general impressions, as well as once the team created options, we asked for feedback on those direct options. And we'll tell you more about that in just a minute. This is the charge statement for the team. Usually I hop right by it. And tonight I think it's really important that we read. And so I'm going to read it to you and to the audience at home, because I think it's really important that we're grounded in what this work is, so we also know what this work isn't. I think it's really important. So the purpose of the school start and end time study is to determine the optimal schedule to meet the overall health, academic, and social developmental needs of all K-12 students. The work will include recommendations for bus routes and pick-up drop-off times for all students, and will consider the school day as well as before school and after school activities and childcare. Extensive research, best practices, input from stakeholders, and the parameters of the school district budget will inform the work. So this is what drove our work in all of the different areas and how we did our work as a team. Part of the work, as we came together as a team, it's always important to establish who you are, some team identity. So this was a team made up of over 20 individuals. I had not met most of these people before. They didn't know me, they didn't know the superintendent, and so we had to get to know each other and also figure out how we were going to do this work together. And so our first meeting consisted of a couple different exercises to establish our norms, our protocols, as well as our group expectations. And so you will notice, I'm going to flip back and forth for a minute between the two. We were always focused on being engaged and being respectful and really focusing on the data. And at the same time, you'll see over and over and over again, student-centered, student-centered, student-centered. So students truly were at the center of all of our work. Going back to the team, here's the full roster of the team. It included students, parents, teachers and staff, as well as consultants from K-12 Transportation, who focuses on all of our routing. So how do all these students actually get picked up and taken to school every day? As well as ParkTV Transportation, they provide our general education, most of our busing. K-12 Transportation also represented MTI, who provides our busing for special education students in the district. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for a quick conversation about budget and how it intersects with transportation.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Patricia Magnuson, the Director of Business Services. I provided a little bit of context for the group so they could understand what the implications might be of increased costs for transportation. You'll learn a little bit more about this from our friends at K-12 Transportation, but the cost to increase an increased cost to transportation comes in terms of the amount to increase the number of buses that we have on route. So it costs about $50,000 for every bus that we add to our routing, and you'll learn a little bit more about what that means in a little bit. Because transportation is part of the general fund, to increase costs there, we have to take reductions in other parts of the general fund, and I'll take you through some of what that looks like in these pie charts. The first thing we are looking at here is just all of the different funds in the school district. The largest being the general fund, and that's where transportation sits. So about 72% of our budgets across all funds are in the general fund, which is where transportation lives. And then these are all of the parts of that 72%. So the general fund is made up of mostly salaries and benefits. This is the profile of a school district. This is what school districts look like. We're about 85% salaries and benefits within the general fund, made up of all kinds of staff in the general fund, mostly teachers, but also the paraprofessional and support staff, all of the administrative staff, custodial staff, all are part of that salary and benefits. And then if you just take, I just want to point out too, the little gray part, about 5% of the general fund is where pupil transportation lives. That's the cost of pupil transportation for St. Louis Park Public Schools. So if you take that 5% and break it down, here's how we spend our funding for transportation. It's about equally broken down into three parts. The first part being that gray area, that's our contracted regular transportation. That's really what we're talking about, the to and from transportation. That's about $981,000 today. And the other third, that yellow part, is special ed transportation. That's about 37% of the transportation budget. And as you might recall, special education transportation is partially funded as part of the special education, both federal and state formulas associated with that. And then the last two parts are other specialized transportation. We have desegregation transportation students that we bring to and from school from Minneapolis. It's about 21%. Keep in mind that that is a fully funded through the integration transportation funding, so that's fully funded transportation. And then there's another small part of field trips and other activity buses that we provide. So we're really talking about that gray portion, that 33% is where our to and from transportation costs would come from. Now I'm going to turn it over to K-12 transportation to give us a little more in-depth overview.
All right, thank you. And my name is Rick Zheng from K-12 Transportation. Just going to talk to you guys a little bit about some terminology for transportation on what we're going to present tonight. A couple things just getting going here. We'll talk about tiers tonight. So basically a tier is a vehicle picking up a group of students and dropping them off at a particular school. So a tier is part of a route, and a route is a combination of the tiers. So currently we have a three-tier system, and we'll kind of get into that. But a tier is a small segment of a route. A route is basically half of what a bus would be. And as Patricia explained, it's about a $50,000 cost per bus for the district. Okay. Our current situation for transportation is Tier 1 is middle school. We have 18 buses currently. For the middle school, average length of route is 29 minutes. Their length a day is 6 hours and 42 minutes, and the longest ride in district is about 38 minutes. Second tier, we have the high school and PSI. They ride together. Currently, they utilize 24 buses. Average length for that tier is about 28 minutes. For the high school, it's 33 minutes for Park Spanish Immersion. And as you see, there's a discrepancy on the length of day. We have 6 hours and 50 minutes for the high school day, and 6 hours and 30 minutes for Park Spanish Immersion. And that kind of works out well with the setup that we have currently, where they ride together. We drop off Park Spanish and pick up Park Spanish first, so we can kind of utilize that time difference. And the longest length of ride in district is about 40 minutes for your high school and about 45 minutes for Park Spanish. Third tier, so the last tier in the morning and the last tier in the afternoon, is Aquila, Peter Hobart, and Susan Lindgren. We utilize 19 buses at that point. Average length of time for that tier is about 23 minutes, and their length of day is 6 hours and 30 minutes. Longest bus ride time is about 34 minutes for in-district students. A several ways districts typically transport their students. One option is the one-tier option. That's when everybody comes to school at the same time, everybody leaves at the same time. One of the difficulties with that is the number of buses that it takes. For St. Louis Park here, we're estimating about 61 buses it'd take at a cost for regular ed transportation of $2.6 million. Next option would be a two-tier system, and that would be approximately 36 buses and at a cost for regular education at about $1.3 million. Our three-tier, which we operate now, so currently we utilize 27 buses, and we have a cost for regular ed transportation of $981,000. And you look at the prices. The prices are going down as the tiers are getting. You pack more schools into a bus route, but unfortunately, you get to a certain point where the time that it takes for that fourth tier ends up costing money. So currently, we have a contract where we have our fees for time are based on a 4.5 hour time frame per route, and so as you add more time, costs go up. And so now you're looking at a four-tier. Even though we utilize 23 buses, the cost actually starts going up to $1.1 million just because of that added time. Okay. Current benefits to our current system, basically the efficiency. As you know, we have a three-tier system. That's the lowest cost in the group of the tier systems. Our families are familiar with our time schedules, so their work schedules, late afternoon activities. High school and middle school students currently can now be at home with their elementary siblings when they get home. Currently, we have a consistent elementary time, so all the elementaries except for PSI are running pretty much the same times in that third tier. Middle school students can participate in activities and high school athletics, and the high school has the later start time, which is currently preferable for the sleep studies and data. Current challenges to our system at this time. We have on the third tier, between the second and third tier, which is the high school tier and the elementary tier, we have some recovery time issues where we have trouble getting out of the high school, dropping off the students, and getting to the elementaries on time. With the three-tier system, if we have a problem on the first tier or the second tier, it goes down the line, so it affects every school on the route as it goes through. And we have a relocation of PSI to Cedar Manor that we have to basically look at and plan for in the future here. We have some plans either way, but that is one of the options here that we do have to look at also.
Thank you, Rich. So now we've talked a little bit about how we got here, and we've also kind of laid some groundwork of what we know today. How does transportation work in St. Louis Park? We've learned some new vocabulary about tiers and routes and assorted other things. And now I'm going to turn it over to one of the parents who was a part of the project team, Marty Stillman, and he's going to walk you through some of the academic research we reviewed and some best practices.
Thank you. So my name is Marty Stillman. I am a parent of a graduate last year from the senior high school, who's now in his first year of college. I have a daughter who's now a junior in the high school, and then a son at PSI. So the why, I felt passionate about being involved with this process and was happy to be a part of it because I feel strongly about the health impacts that and the improvements that we can make for our students. And this was an opportunity to be a part of that process. So I just have 5 slides to talk about again, there could be long lectures about sleep, but just 5 slides. As a group, we looked at reviewing a wealth of studies examining school start times and heard from a national expert as well, Kyla Wallstrom. And this was important because we wanted to be as objective as we could with respect to taking data and how do we make some of these decisions. And we universally felt that research and data would help us. So this included looking at multiple studies, including the intersection of start times with race and socioeconomic status. So research clearly demonstrates that adequate sleep, 8 to 10 hours, is required for optimal adolescent health and learning. Not all students that are adolescents get to 8 to 10 hours, we know that. But we learned that increments of even 15 minutes, 30 minutes, the longer you can get, the better. And as children transition to adolescence, their circadian and homeostatic regulation of sleep, it naturally delays. And so their biologic sleep clock shifts. One of the articles that we read had this quote, adolescents are forced to wake when the start time is too early, before their brains are ready, and many are in a constant state of jet lag. I was particularly moved when a middle school teacher shared with the group that when she has a morning, her first class and the last class, and it's the same subject, that there will be, along with kids literally being asleep in her first class, the performance of the afternoon class as a whole is better than the first class, and she's seen this multiple times. So what are the consequences of inadequate sleep? Decreased academic performance, increased risk of mental health issues, including depression, suicide, and substance use, already issues that are concerning for high school students. Increased risk of risk behaviors. So in one study, such as not wearing a seatbelt, texting while driving, being a passenger in a car of someone who's under the influence of alcohol, these risk behaviors in one study, when they had more than 7 hours of sleep versus less than 7 hours of sleep, risk behaviors were different. And again, it was worse for the students that had less than 7 hours of sleep. Increased risk of sport-related injury. This was a study that looked at more or less than 8 hours of sleep. For the group that had less than 8 hours of sleep, was 1.7 times self-reported increase in injury compared to those with more sleep. What else did we learn? When school start times are later, total sleep time increases for adolescents. So if you increase if you delay the start time, some people say, well, aren't kids just going to go to bed later? And what they found in this interesting study called Sleep More in Seattle, a major study that looked before and after the implementation of a delayed start time, that when they delayed the start 55 minutes, kids slept 35 minutes longer. And again, as we learned, 35 minutes is significant. So what are the gains? Improved outcomes in core classes like math and reading. The gains from more sleep were even stronger for at-risk students. Again, in this Sleep More in Seattle study, when they did this, one school, Franklin High School, that had 88% of socioeconomic kids that were at risk, they had more improvement in decreased absences and less tardiness. And the same was seen in other schools, again with those same student makeup. Fewer car accidents involving adolescents in communities where start times were changed. So the evidence, again, and the support for more sleep was significant, which we all reviewed. So in summary, what did we learn? Sleep is critical for adolescents. We also learned about middle schoolers. They are adolescents, and they experience changes in their sleep-wake cycle. The more you progress through middle school and high school, the more you see this effective change. So as a 10 or 11-year-old, you may or may not start to see it. As a 12-year-old, you start to see more of the sleep change. As 13, 14, etc. So the changes are significant as you get older, but it starts in middle school. Middle school and high schoolers can't simply change their natural wake and sleep cycle. So if you just say, look, you're going to have to get up earlier, so go to bed, they can't do it. It doesn't mean 100%, but the majority of kids can't do it. So they'll just go and they'll just lay in bed. So what happens when you delay start times is they sleep longer. Adolescents get more, as I said, adolescents get more sleep when the times are later. What about elementary students? So we asked Kyla Wallstrom, this was a question too. what happens to elementary students? And what she explained to us was that they're more malleable in terms of adjusting a sleep-wake cycle. So the studies are inconclusive. One study said maybe it makes a difference. That's not good for elementary students. One says it doesn't make a difference. There is no clear-cut science with respect to studies of elementary students. It is clear with respect to middle school and high school. And she explained to us again that so if you had to shift the cycle for elementary students, that is something that they can do more easily as opposed to the older students. So we had this data, and we wanted to get more input. So we wanted to look at comparable school districts. In this case, we looked at, as you can see here, many other districts. What we found basically was that it was all over the board. There were some that compared to some of our recommendations, some that didn't. Edina Public Schools that recently completed a school start time study. You can see here their elementary schools start at 7:50 and 8:40, high school at 8:30, the middle school at 9:20. But again, a variety of tier systems were seen when we looked at other districts. We wanted more data, so we looked at local data. This was from a parent survey. So this is a phone survey of 400 St. Louis Park public school parents. This included people who did not speak English. And so some people said, well, is 400 enough? And we're told by the people who did this, the same as national surveys where you get a representative amount to represent the larger population, that 400 was statistically enough to make that make some conclusions. What you don't see here, what is my favorite, was when Sarah told us that when she asked the elementary students, they wanted to start school later and end earlier. But other than that, what did we learn? So the elementary parents, about 64% said it felt like the right time. Almost half, 46%, favored an earlier start time. We don't know the breakout with respect to PSI, which started a little earlier than the other elementary schools. Middle school was pretty clear with respect to 3 out of 4 people saying that they favored a later start time, and 37% felt it was right currently. High school seems to be the sweet spot, if you will, and the evidence would bear that out. That around 8:30 start time, from what Kyla Wallstrom taught us, is sort of a nice time with respect to after-school activities, getting enough sleep, and so that mirrored what we saw from the parent survey with respect to 79% finding that to be the right start time. So I will turn it over, and thank you.
Thank you, Marty, for sharing the research with us. We're now going to jump ahead and talk some more. We spent some time on academic data. Now we want to hear from St. Louis Park. So what did our stakeholders think? What were some kind of generalized assumptions, thoughts as we headed into this process? And so Andy's going to share with us what we learned when we sought public input.
Hello, I am Angela Skelly. I have 4 kids in the district. One at the high school, she's in 10th grade, and then 2 at Aquila in 5th and 1st grade, and then 1 in early learning currently. Why I was kind of drawn to this project was because I do have 4 kids in the district and their education is very important to me. I wanted to get more involved with it, so I thought this would be a great way. And then I also wanted to educate myself on how this all works. So, public input. We asked what are the most important things for the team to consider as they develop the school start end time recommendations for fall 2019. We had 22 meetings with students, teachers and staff, parents, and public community groups. We also did the thought exchange for online sharing. And the common themes we found were to refer to the research, consider student needs first, consider family needs for schedules and childcare, consider budget impacts to school district and families, and consider athletics and activities.
So now we've gotten as far as the input stage. Next, the team came together and had their first chance to dig into all of the data, all of the research, all of the ideas, and start putting some options together. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Patricia and Rich, or maybe just Rich. I'm not sure if they're going to do it together. And they're going to walk through kind of the nuts and bolts of the 4 options that we prepared.
Thank you, Sarah. So the group came up with 4 individual options. At the time they came up with options, we didn't have times associated with them. But after the group came up with the option, K-12 Transportation was charged to come up with a time and a cost associated with that option for the district. So the first option is option square, and this is actually a 2-tier option. The first tier would consist of Aquila, Peter Hobart, Susan Lindgren, and Park Spanish Immersion, with a bell time of 7:55 and an end time of 2:25. The second tier would be the middle school with a bell time of 8:45 and 3:27, and in the afternoon, I'm sorry, the other school on the second tier is the high school with a start time of 8:45 and an end time of 3:35. Projected costs here is about $1.4 million for regular ed costs on that. Option circle we came up with. First tier consists of Aquila, Peter Hobart, Susan Lindgren. The AM bell time would be 7:45. PM bell time would be 2:15. The second tier would be shared between Park Spanish Immersion and the middle school, with Park Spanish having an 8:30 a.m. start time and a 3 p.m. bell time. For Park Spanish, middle school would be 8:30 to 3:12. And our third tier, the high school tier, would start at 9:15 and end at 4:05, with a projected cost of $1 million. Option triangle consists of Aquila, Peter Hobart, Susan Lindgren, and Park Spanish Immersion on Tier 1, with a bell time of 7:45 a.m. and a PM bell time of 2:15 p.m. High school would be on the second tier, currently where it's at, with a bell time of 8:25 and end time of 3:15. And the third tier is the middle school tier at bell time of 9:10 and the PM bell of 3:52. And that had an estimated cost of $1,053,000. Our fourth option that was created by the group here and was presented to them for a decision on what to forward to you guys, was the diamond option. First tier consists of Aquila, Peter Hobart, and Susan Lindgren, with a bell time of 7:45 in the morning, and PM bell time would be 2:15. Second tier would be the Park Spanish Immersion and the high school. Park Spanish would have a bell time of 8:30 and end at 3 p.m. And the high school would start at 8:30 and end at 3:20. Third tier would consist of the middle school, and that would be at start time of 9:23 and an end time of 4:05. And that one was pretty much cost neutral.
So now we have 4 options, and we were excited to take them on the road once again. We did 22 meetings during input, and this time we went on the road to 26 different groups to share the options and hear feedback about what people thought of these. And so I'm going to turn it over to Claire, and she's going to talk to you about how we did feedback.
Good evening. My name is Claire Warren. I've lived in St. Louis Park with my family for about 22 years. We've had 2 sets of kids go through the schools here. Our older set came in middle school, or junior high as it was then, with just 7th and 8th grade, and then went through the senior high. My younger 2 kids are now a 2nd grader in PSI and a preschooler who will be in kindergarten in a few years. So I was kind of excited when this opportunity came up because I've been looking for a way to get a little bit more involved, specifically in the school district, not just the community. So I put in my application and was shocked to be one of the people picked, but I'm very happy to do so thank you for that opportunity. When we went out to the public to ask for their feedback on the 4 options that Rich went over for you, our presenting question was, considering the challenges and benefits of each, what are your thoughts and questions about the proposed options? As Sarah said, we upped that to 26 different meetings across the school district. We met with students, teachers, staff, all of the same people, parents, public community groups, and even up the usage of the tool that they had launched previously called Thought Exchange. So if you're not familiar with this tool, it's pretty cool. You go on and you give your thoughts, short statements, kind of like Twitter, and then people can go in and say how much or how little they agree with that statement. So just some stats from that. We had 860 participants and 579 thoughts shared. Over 21,000 ratings on those thoughts. So I think it's a good way to gather a lot of quick feedback from people to some of those short statements, those instant thoughts. Some of the common themes that we heard from people, of course, in support of the opportunities to expand the after-school enrichment opportunities for the elementary school, both academic and otherwise. And as well, we heard across the board that people all agreed that those middle school students needed more sleep. I think everybody everywhere was in agreement with that. There were some things that they wanted us to consider seeing these options, remembering at the time that they didn't have the information about the start and stop times or the budget that was added after this part. But they wanted us to make sure that we really did consider the child care and budget impacts to the elementary school families, also the budget impacts to the school district, of course, and then impacts to athletics and other after-school activities should the middle school and high school move later in the rotation.
Thanks so much. So a big question that has come up since the group last met is, so how do you have 4 options and come to a recommendation to send to the school board? And so I'm going to invite Chris Clark up, and he's going to walk you through the team, how they did their work, and specifically how they came to consensus on the options you're going to hear tonight.
Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. My name is Chris Clark. I have a freshman and an 8th grader currently, girls in the school district. I was also very involved with the Aquila PTA back when they were in Aquila. Ken and I are old working buddies from that group, so I've been involved in the community, and this was an excellent way for me to continue that involvement. To answer Sarah's question, how did we come to a consensus? Well, after the fighting and the fist throwing, we calmed down a little bit. But we did have some very vigorous discussions, and that was well received, I think, from all points. We were in groups of 3, 4, 5 at a table, and we were asked to discuss the 4 options, what we had heard from the public feedback, what we had heard from friends and community members, and then discuss that with our own feelings and see if we could reach a consensus. Obviously, there was a lot of information to consider, to be quite truthful, and you've seen the information that we've gone through, and it can be overwhelming. But it was a good group discussion that night, particularly at our table. Angie was a part of that as well, and she can agree or confirm. We wanted to be conscientious of everybody's concern. We had the athletic director who had presented the possible conflicts with high school sports and after-school activities. We took into our consideration our own experiences with the middle school. I have a like I said, an 8th grade daughter who now I understand why she doesn't get up in the morning. It isn't that she doesn't want to, it's that she can't. And that is profoundly impacted the way we deal with her now on a daily basis, my wife and I, understanding this information. And so as we considered that, and we considered the added cost to the district budget, and when we considered some of those particular levels and tiers, we're now talking about losing teachers. And that was really brought some of those options off the table for us. We said we can't give up teachers to bus these students. So we have to continue to work and try and find a way that we can reach a consensus. And so as we continued to discuss and really review those 4, as you can see, 4 of the 6 tables were able to reach a consensus amongst themselves. It was contentious, but we finally got to a point. When we presented that to the larger group then, however, not all tables were able to reach that consensus, which led then to an individual mandate to rank what we wanted to see. And I think if we were to go back to those tables, I think the ranked outcomes clearly spoke more to, again, all of those different items being taken into consideration. Athletics, busing and the cost to the school, the impact on the children, which again, we always had at our forefront. How does this impact the kids? And that's what we wanted to consider first and foremost. And so when we considered all of those things and talked amongst ourselves and ranked them, as you can see a picture of our board there, the final outcome was pretty clear. And our 2 proposals were pretty clear. And so it was a process. It was a lively discussion, but it was one that we believe, I think I can speak for the group, that we worked hard at, and we're very comfortable and very proud of the work that we did. And we're looking forward to your decision and consideration of our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so now we've talked about how we got here. Now I'm going to ask Colin Cox to come forward, and he's going to actually make the recommendation and walk you through what the project team is recommending tonight.
My name is Colin Cox, and some of you may recognize me as being on the learning design team. So I have a son who is in 5th grade at Aquila, and I have a goddaughter who is at PSI. So I have a couple of people who are invested in this, a couple of reasons to be invested in what goes on here. And again, as I said, the learning design team and continuing to see what St. Louis Park is able to do in terms of our facilities and then things throughout the curriculum day. So as Chris mentioned, we had a lively debate and a lot of discussion here, and I think you can see it in some of the presentations by the parents, how invested they were and how many questions they asked. And I think we've glossed over the fact that we really put Rich through the ringer through part of this process. And people weren't even, when they were saying, let's start with a 3-tier system, people said, but what about? But what about? And so people were really pushing that envelope, really taking it seriously about what everybody had to say and what we were hearing from input. And some of the input that we picked up casually from some of our fellow parents and from teachers and from even our students and getting their opinion about what we thought mattered. So what you see here are the 2 recommendations that we could come to a consensus on that we thought it would be great to bring forward for you to make the decision on. And so the first one that we have is triangle. And this is that first, second, and the 3-tier plan. And you have all of the elementary schools starting at the same time, at that 7:45 time. And I think this was one of the few that we could we could really get kids to the bus. Or one of the things that we didn't talk about up to now was the fact that this also allows us to get most bus routes started before 7 or after 7 a.m. 7 a.m. or after. But you have all of the elementary schools starting at 7:45. You have the high school starting at 8:25, which is pretty comparable to what they're doing now. And you have the middle school starting at that later time of 9:10. One of the challenges with this would be in terms of athletics and how that works with some of the middle school athletics, and we did ask that question. And that was a really hard point for a lot of people, and people were really sitting there and debating that, including at the table that I was at. I was amongst three middle school people, including a student, and again, I take this kind of seriously too because I have that fifth grader who's going to be at the middle school next year, and so thinking about those opportunities is important for me as well. And then for the other recommendation that we have, the project, or for the other recommendation is Square, and this is that two-tier recommendation. And we have all of the elementary schools again starting at the same time at that 7:55 in this case, and finishing up at 2:25. But then we have the middle school and the high school starting at 8:45. And again, if you can look at and think things from that middle school perspective, which that middle school seems to be really important when you think about those transitional years, that this does provide a little bit more opportunity in terms of athletics, and as we heard some things even from the student side, but also from the coaching side. The two differences between these, obviously, as they mentioned earlier, were some of those costs, and that this is a more expensive option. And so some people really had reservations about that, not knowing what that really meant. But a lot of people felt drawn to this because of that, going back to some of those things when we talk about how to serve all students, and going back to some of those guiding principles.
Thank you so much. So, knowing this, we're here tonight, but we also want to talk just quickly about what the future looks like. So, we do have some more next steps that we want to make you as board members, as well as the community who's tuning in tonight and watching this after the fact, know that there's still time. If we haven't heard from you, we want to hear from you. If we've heard from you and you want to tell us one more time what is really important, we want to hear from you. And so we've opened up some additional opportunities. We will open up Thought Exchange again for you to share your input there. We have a public meeting right here in room C350 at the high school on Wednesday night. Also have a school board listening session next Monday at 7 p.m. at the middle school. And there is also a school board meeting on March 25th with open forum where people can come and speak to you directly as a school board. An important note, originally we had talked about on March 25th asking the school board to make a decision. We now know that that's too fast. We need some more time. We need to be able to gather some more feedback. We need to hear from stakeholders, and we need to give you as board members time to digest all this information that the team's been working on for months on end. So we've pushed that back now to April 8th so that gives ample time for feedback, and it also opens up the opportunity for open forum at the March 25th meeting. So that's what's coming next. And I also wanted to invite Superintendent Osai back up to talk some more about what does this look like in terms of implementation. So we make the decision and then what happens. And so he'll walk through some of that.
Thank you, Sarah. I guess I failed to introduce myself when I started and say why I'm invested in this work. So my name is Ashton Osai, superintendent here, and I have a kindergartner, and I have another student in elementary school in a few years. And I just think that this is mission critical, that as we continue to move forward and aspire to have all of our students actualize our district mission, that we're taking into consideration the overall health needs of all of our students. And as Sarah said, I've greatly appreciated the feedback and input that we've gotten from our stakeholders on this topic. And, you know, I would say we've heard a variety. I've heard a variety of different things connected to start time and changing start times. And I would say if we put them into different groups, one of the pieces that we heard is just the the child care implications, right, and the potential increased costs to families by moving elementary school earlier, right? So as we think about that, that creates additional time in the afternoon where certain families don't have to have child care now. Changing would have implications. So that's something that I've heard quite a bit from our families that have provided feedback, and that's something that as we move forward, we're going to have to really consider how we mitigate those costs to make sure that a change like this does not have significant financial impact for families. Something else that we've heard a lot about is just the implications for student participation, right? We recognize as a public school district that while our primary focus is around academics and education, that we're looking at the whole child, and that many students are engaged and motivated to come to school because of the extracurricular and co-curricular activities that they get to participate in on a daily basis. So one of the things that we've heard a lot from our community from a feedback standpoint is, how will you ensure that my child will still have an opportunity to participate, particularly at the middle school and at the high school? So as we continue to move forward, these are different things that we really have to think about as we develop a plan to meet the needs of all of our community members. So we're currently in the process of looking at, particularly at the elementary level, how do we increase options for families? Either it be school-age child care in its current form with Kids Place, or how do we access additional targeted services programs to create opportunities for students to stay after school in a safe environment where they can continue to learn and grow, so that it doesn't become a cost barrier for families. We also have to consider what will it look like from a transportation standpoint, and also from just an overall offering standpoint with the options that we presented for middle schoolers, from an extracurricular and a co-curricular activity standpoint, and also what does that mean for our high school students, knowing that if we back times up, that it could potentially interfere with class time. So these are just a number of things in high-level themes that we've heard and that we're looking at right now as we move forward. And we recognize that in order to ensure that we're meeting the overall academic health needs of our students, that these are going to be major pieces that we'll have to come up with solid plans for.
All right, and with that, I'm going to ask the project team to come this way, and we're all available for any questions you might have, as well as the directors that are in the audience tonight and the cabinet members. So we're happy to take your questions.
And before we do that, I just want to thank you again for a really solid presentation, for a lot of solid, good work. And I appreciated the fact that you told us you had some heartfelt conversations about that, and I suspect that our questions are going to ask a little bit more about that and dig and probe a little bit deeper to hear your best thinking, any concerns you have, any concerns you don't have, what you want us to look at that you weren't allowed to look at if there are such things, or what you've thought about since. So just give us your best effort, and when we ask a question, I want anybody to feel free to come up and answer. Just because one person goes first, I don't want any of the rest of you to feel like it's not okay for you to come and give us your thinking as well. Okay? Mary.
Okay, I would like to ask a couple of questions if I could, but first I will, of course, echo Nancy's gratitude to all of you. I know this was so much work and so much reading, and I'm sure so many people have wanted to tell you all everything they think about this. So lots of listening as well. So I am also incredibly grateful for your dedication to this work. My first question is, could any of you, all of you, talk a little bit more about what you may have heard from our elementary teachers about how they see their students' alertness and attention throughout the day, and whether they would perceive any benefits or challenges to moving the start time for the K through 5 earlier.
I wanted to look around just to make sure nobody else wanted to take it, because I recognize you all have heard from me quite a bit, so I know that you want to potentially hear different voices, but what I heard specifically and what we heard as a group from our elementary staff is that they are looking forward and excited about this potential opportunity. What they've shared with us is that, just developmentally, that our elementary school age students, as the day goes on, they lose stamina, so to speak, so that they believe that being that they're up earlier generally, that the sooner they can get them, the longer that they can have them in a very focused, engaged environment. What we've kind of heard is that after lunch, it becomes very challenging to engage elementary learners in a very sustained manner.
Anybody else want to chime in on that point?
I'll chime in on one thing that I learned from one of the women that was in our group, and she works with and I don't remember her exact title, but she works with the Spanish-speaking population of our school at Carmen with the outreach program there. And she said that she thought that the folks that she works with, the ones in her school, would really welcome this change, specifically for those after-school enrichment opportunities, that those dollars would be coming from specific programs that would be targeted to doing that work, and that would help them out also with the child care situation. But right now, not all the elementary schools can take advantage of that because of schedules and whatnot. So she was excited about that and thought that the folks she served would also be.
Before I ask my next question. There's lots of people. Okay, the second one was, could you talk a little bit about why option diamond was taken off the table? Because I see that it's the cost neutral option. So when we're talking about budgets, I'd love to know a little bit more of the thinking about why that one was deemed not optimal. Yep.
So on my table, this was a hot button. Because what's that? Oh, okay. Sure. Because at first blush, this looks like the best option. And this was of the, I think there was 5 of us, Angie, at the table, or 4. I think at least 4 of us had this probably as our number one option because the cost obviously was at the forefront there. But as we talked more about it, and as we got input, particularly from Andy, our AD, one of the things that it negated this was the start times of sporting events after school. He shared with us that those start times are often mandated by the conference. And so if you're ending the high school at 3:20 and you've got to get middle schoolers over, now you're taking them out of class for a much longer period of time than you had previously, and you're taking the high schoolers out. And so when we considered that, and when we talked about that impact and the after-school impact, the problem here is that now it negates an after-school activity bus, and that was a concern because, again, you've gone so far into the day now. If you're going to have middle schoolers staying after school, you're talking 5:30, 6 o'clock now before they're getting home, and that really was a concern as well. So those were the reasons on our table that this one was kind of pushed down, and we said, you know what, it changes enough with going to the triangle option that makes a little bit more sense. It's not terribly it doesn't increase the cost to the budget, and it seems to fit everything a little bit better.
So Andy, if you wanted to echo, it seems then from what Chris was just saying that this is if we want to keep our middle schoolers in particular in class for the full school day and in sports, this would be a no-go.
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
I just want to add, then I'll let Andy speak. The other reason that some people had not gone to this option was because it was felt that putting all the elementary schools' start time at the same time might be advantageous.
Great, thank you.
And I'm just going to, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I was one of the people who did push for this as possibly providing 3 options to the school board, not to confound, but to give another option out there, because there was some interest in this. But one of the things that you can look at too is also that 4 o'clock end time at the middle school. And we did hear a lot from a lot of middle school staff and students about that benefit of having that extra time at the end of the day and how much they appreciated that. And I don't think they were convinced that could be repeated. You could offer that in the morning in that same way. So there was a strong benefit.
Say that last part one more time.
Yeah, with the current middle school setup, they do have extra time at the end of the day that they can use to spend time with the students, to do enrichment opportunities, to do activities, whatever it is. But the current setup allows for more of that to happen. And at 4:05, they thought, particularly with the current contracts and things in terms of work days, and that would be a challenge. It'd also just be a challenge in terms of what those activities in that time might push into the evening.
I just wanted to jump in related to the diamond triangle conversation, since they're both 3-tier options, and ask a little bit about the safety considerations for K through 5 children waiting for buses in the early morning dark hours, and the slight spin on that is, under the diamond option, PSI doesn't have to have kids out at 6:45. Under the triangle option, as I understand it, the earliest pickup time for a kindergartner for PSI is going to be 6:45 a.m. So I just want to know how you all weighed and considered and thought that through.
So, again, that was a hot button topic because that was a big concern. We would have preferred, had we been able to have that nobody gets picked up before 7. But with Rich, right? With his suggestion or sharing, we're talking about a very small population of children who would be picked up prior to 7 a.m. Numbers you may not have them either. Less than 10% of that total elementary school, and again, that was mainly PSI kids who just are coming from all over the district rather than that centralized area around the school. So it was a very small number of kids, but and because of that, then that taking in everything else into consideration kind of worked its way down our objection wall, if you will. But it was, and it continues to be, a concern of the group of, if we had all of our druthers, we would not have anybody picked up before 7. But based on, again, the busing needs and trying to remain that as neutral to the budget as we could, that's what brought the triangle to the forefront rather than the diamond.
Anybody else?
I'm going to jump in on this one as well. My daughter's in 2nd grade at PSI, and my son will be going there in the next few years. And it was noticeable to me this morning when I woke up and it was 7:05 and I'm looking outside and like, okay, it is dark, and my child would be out there. But I'm also blessed with a child who gets up at 6 o'clock every morning no matter what. And I think my son's going to be the same way. And I just think that as a parent speaking now, not as a project team member, I'm not going to have my kids out there anyways without me, so I can control that situation as a parent or work with the other parents on my block to trade off on those duties. And it's worth the overall investment for the student population to me to support the change.
Just a little bit about some transportation stuff. A couple of things that we're kind of charged with coming up with these options. One, try to get everybody before 7 o'clock, try to get everybody picked up after 7 o'clock for in-district students. For the triangle, unfortunately, being that Park Spanish Immersion is a district-wide school, it makes it really difficult to maintain a low cost of transportation and to have everybody picked up before the 7 o'clock time, or after the 7 o'clock time, excuse me. Being that Aquila, Peter Hobarth, and Susan Lindgren are such little pockets in the district that divide the district up into 3 separate areas that are a lot smaller than the entire district. That's why we're seeing where we're able to keep everybody picked up at 7 o'clock or after for Aquila, Peter Hobart, and Susan Lindgren. Being that Park Spanish Immersion is a district-wide school is the reasoning for the fact that we have to start those routes earlier, because it takes, just a thought, your southeast side of the district, picking up a group of kids, it might take 15-20 minutes to get from the southeast side over to the Cedar Manor side to drop off the students at PSI. So that's what the difference is on that one. But we do, it's all about costs, so if that is something the board really wants to strive for, we can look at that and put a cost to it. Square, we're able to, so Square, the pickup time currently as with the times all together at the same time. So Square actually is a 6:55 pickup for PSI. We're able to, if we can adjust the Park Spanish Immersion so that the times aren't aligned with the other elementary schools, we can push that one back, but only that one. We won't be able to slide Aquila, Peter Hobart, and Susan Lindgren back with that. But we were able to do that if we were able to move Peter Hobart. So we couldn't make that one so that PSI would have 7 o'clock or later pickup.
So just one quick question related to square or triangle. How many total buses are we talking for each of those 2 options?
So triangle, we're sitting probably about, we currently run 27, so we're probably running 29 for triangle. And then square, yeah, about 38.
And going forward, I know we've already had some concerns and issues with staffing, and on the athletic side, having to bundle up like girls tennis and JV football. Is that right, Andy? So yeah, so one concern I have is, can we even hire and sustain enough personnel to make this feasible?
It would be a challenge for Park Adams or any contractor in the metro area. With the low unemployment rate that the metro area and Minnesota has seen, it is difficult to find drivers to drive the vehicles. So the added vehicles that we'd have to put on the road would be a challenge, but I'm sure that they'd be able to come up with that if we gave them enough time to plan for that and hire the drivers and train them.
And Rich, you're talking about the square option when you say that?
The square, yeah.
Marty, you mentioned the sort of advantages that the team had seen for keeping the elementaries together. And could you speak a little bit more about that? Because I just heard Rich say, maybe there was wiggle room in one, but it sounds like you picked the 2 where they were all together, and I'm just curious about what the team
Yeah, so this was primarily from the staff and principals and others involved that spoke to maybe some of the educational opportunities that would come for staff if the times were the same. Some perception in the district of equal treatment for all the elementary schools as well.
So, Andy, I see that on the square where you have very late start or end times for athletic programs. You want to speak to that a little bit? How would that work out?
Well, it would greatly increase the amount of school time that high school students would be missing, and it would just push everybody's day that much later. It would just about double the amount of school time that they're missing currently right now. Square would, yep.
Marty, in your presentation, you had mentioned social economical benefits to. Can you talk a little bit? I may have missed.
Sure. So
those points.
in the Sleep More in Seattle study, they found that there were advantages to less tardiness and absenteeism in all the schools that they looked at that had a later start time. In particular, the advantages were seen even more in the schools that had ethnic diversity and socioeconomic disadvantage.
So I just want to clarify what I thought I heard you say, which was in terms of the safety concern for elementary school students starting earlier, it's the consensus of the committee that they're going to be okay at 7 a.m. in the dark, or they're going to have a parent with them, and if they don't have a parent, they're still going to be okay. I mean, we looked at this 9 years ago, and that was a major concern for the board at that time, so I really want to circle back to that and make sure I'm hearing you accurately on what you're telling us.
Chair Gores, so what we recognize is that in the state of Minnesota, about 2 months a year is dark at around 7 o'clock, and we also recognize that it is certainly a significant consideration as we want to make sure that all of our students are safe. We also recognize that there are a number of school districts around us that have made this shift, and that if the board decides to approve one of these recommendations, that we can learn from the strategies that those other school districts have taken to make sure that their students are safe at the bus stop in the morning. But we certainly recognize the concern and the potential safety implications, and we're willing as a project team and as a school district to figure out ways to ensure student safety.
Just to add some of the feedback sessions that I attended, there were parents of elementary school students, close to half want an earlier start time. And the other thing is with respect to childcare, and again, it's not for everybody, but some said, well, this will help me because I've been having to find childcare in the morning. I'm not trying to oversell it, I'm just saying that at the feedback sessions that I attended, I heard that feedback as well, that this may be advantageous.
We as a team, we really pushed on that too, and we asked again. I think Rich really he deserves a lot for his time in trying to really figure that out, because we really did say, what about this? Can we shift this? We were asking a lot of those questions. What if we move 10 minutes? And then he would go through and do just what you saw him do up here, do that mental math and try to figure out if that's going to impact and what that's going to look like. And I think as we were weighing all these things and we were doing the best that we could with the information and the time that we had, that felt like probably we could accept a certain level of that based on the level of impact that would have. Not saying that that's not significant, but we were just saying that if we're looking at everything, when you're balancing out the health of students who are adolescents, when you're balancing out start times, athletics, after-school activities, jobs after school, all of those things, for that percentage that it would affect. And we know that any of these changes will affect just about everybody, will have some change in their day. So it seemed a little bit more like a smaller thing that we could come to a consensus on. Not to give a 100%, like we're all behind this, but to say that we can agree that these are probably our best options.
Thank you.
And one thing we did because as a committee, with the safety piece, that was important to us. I just want to be clear on that. And so it did come across saying, we'd like to, how late can we go to address that, and then running into all the other after-school issues. So it wasn't perfect, as you said, but we did look at that, and yeah, we'd love 70 buses and everyone to get picked up at 8. I mean, which is what we wanted. So I just don't want to, that was a concern that was addressed.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving us your heartfelt considerations on that. Anybody else on that before we move on?
I have a two-part question, and it's around Diamond, so we'll start with you, Rich. The Spanish immersion, that is a dedicated ride?
Yeah, all of the options, I'm going to try to find it here. Yeah, all the options that we presented are direct runs. And so they would, Park Spanish would have their own buses.
Then back to you, Andy. So the Diamond, I just want to flush this out a little bit. So the Diamond, that's not part of the initial presentation. The middle school getting out at 4:05 would prevent those middle school students or athletes to participate in the varsity or high school activities straight off. But if there was a change in some of the schedule, like Oriole time went to the end of the day, that could possibly work, right?
That would be a question for the administration at the middle school. Being honest with you.
In theory, no.
But I do believe this, and when I met with Jason Pohl, the assistant principal at the middle school, and Derek Winneberg, the middle school athletic director, the three of us feel very strongly that the later the middle school were to get dismissed, that we believe we would see a decrease in participation as well at the middle school with middle school athletics.
Lots to consider. I thank you so much. It's kind of like nothing's perfect, and you're doing a balancing, as you've said, and it's kind of like a Tetris puzzle. If you move this piece, then this piece, then this piece, and we pull it all together. Is there anything that you think that we need to look at more closely or consider that you weren't able to do, or that's raised a flag for you? We're going to do a deeper dive into some of the pros and cons and cost-benefit analysis at our next meeting. But I wanted to give you a chance to say, well, we have this question that we weren't able to get resolved within our time frame and what we were asked to do. So I just want to give you a chance.
Well, one of the things that I was going to offer in terms of looking at is maybe some cooperation with the city too, again, since we share boundaries, and whether we should be looking at some options in terms of that, whether that's improving lighting or looking at some things like that too. So just as something more to consider is, are there some ways that we can cooperate on this and find some solutions? We also wanted to point out that we were in agreement through this process. We did have, as you see, 4 options here, and we had as many as 6 at one time because each table created one. And one clear thing that came out of that group was that we did not want to have the status quo. The status quo did not work. So just wanted to let you know that that was a strong feeling, that we have issues with that. We know that the middle school start times aren't ideal, and we know that there's going to be changes in the facility as well. So I think that was a pretty unanimous agreement that we weren't going to put that forward to you as an option.
Colin, I'm so glad you raised that, because we did want to ask that specifically. Why did the committee feel that the status quo just did not work and something needs to change?
I will let other people offer up some of those.
That was also one of the things that the several tables I sat with echoed as well. And I think for me, the biggest thing that came out of this was the sleep study. And one of the charts we saw was that post-pubescent kids get their first dose of melatonin at about 11 o'clock p.m. right? So they may fall asleep a little bit before that, but not a lot. They get their second dose, not quite as big a spike, at 6 a.m., which is when our middle schoolers are getting up to get on a bus 45 minutes later. And so, like I said, the impact to my own daughter and in my own life, when I saw that chart, I said, we can't continue to force our children to get up when their bodies are saying, you need to be asleep. And so for me, that just right there crossed off the status quo. And if we're forcing our children to do that, what does that say about us as parents and as a school board, that we're saying, we're putting you forward, except when it comes to sleep, because we're going against nature here. And so I couldn't be a part of that, to say the status quo works enough, because it just simply doesn't.
I'll just add that of the many debates, this was not one of them. We had 20 people in a room with different opinions, and no one wanted to keep it the same. Again, I feel that was strongly based on the research. As you heard, the feedback, 76% wanted to move the time later. I mean, the feedback sessions, pretty much, if you say, was there anything that was consistent? It was that concern.
Just offer again that there was an option circle too that we also jettisoned pretty quickly too, or after it was given some thought to. So that was again, we would look at those things and we took them seriously, and we decided that was a no-go. And so I think it was sort of that many of the things that we heard here, like how can we keep consistent with the research, how can we keep consistent with all of that, and put some idea like that forward. That isn't to say that we don't recognize that people are going to have change again, that there is going to be change, and there were probably some people who do like their current system. They have a rhythm down. We understand that we all get set in patterns, and it's really helpful to have those patterns and not have to change from them. But recognizing everything else, it just didn't make sense.
So before I finish, I don't want you to, we met before this meeting, and we got so that we could get a better understanding of what all the material was and what our process would be going forward. And one of the things that I have asked the administration to do is to come up with some kind of a status quo option for us to look at our next meeting, in case we have options. We could decide on the change and implement it in 2019, 2020, or we could decide on the change but delay implementation a year if we feel like working out what needs to be done for childcare after elementary school is going to take more time. And those were kinds of discussions and concerns we were having. So I don't want you to feel blindsided if you're hearing that that's happening, because that's what we're processing as we try to see how all the Tetris pieces come into place. We could get the bus routes done, but can we get enough people hired in Kids Place and get enough space adjusted and get the rest of the pieces in line? That may not be as quickly doable, and that might involve restructuring some jobs that we have in the district in order to make more people available to do that work. So those are the kind of things we're beginning to hear, and we're going to hear more about, just so you know, because that was outside you had the broad concern. We've started to say, okay, how do we fix that? And that's kind of where we're coming from. For anybody watching at home, Sarah, am I right? You created something on the website and put all the research studies into it so it's easier for people to find. And can you just tell us all what you've done?
The district website is loaded with all of the information, and we just keep refining it and refining it so that it's easier for people to get to, and we will keep doing that. So by all means, it's right under Find It Fast. You can click on Start and End Time Study. You can see all the data we've reviewed tonight as well. And so, and then because now I have the microphone, thank you, Nancy. I also wanted to just tee up the opportunities for additional feedback. So tonight's Monday. We'll be back here again on March 13th, Wednesday night, for a public meeting with Facebook Live. And there's additional opportunities on March 18th, March 25th. And then hopefully we'll be back here on April 8th to talk more about this.
first, thank you again. I don't think we can thank you enough for all the time and effort you put in here and how you're going to be our ambassadors out in the field with whatever we do, because we're counting on you, because we're going to need you. Change is hard, but sometimes it's needed. I want to review, in addition to the listening session that we're going to have on March 21st from 7 to 8:30 p.m. at the Middle School Media Center, and the other opportunities that Sarah has talked about. We have open forum on our March 25 meeting, which is our next meeting here, and we have people can speak. We ask people to keep it to 3 minutes. If there's a group of people that wants to speak on the same topic, we say figure it out and try not to repeat the same thing again and again and again. And so we can get through more input if people want to come. And now that we have costs and times and details attached to all of the recommendations, people may have some things they want to say the same or differently or more than they haven't done in the prior feedback opportunities.
I would just add to that, for those folks who still have questions that they want to be asking, that open forum isn't actually really the best opportunity to do that, because we can't engage in conversation with you during open forum. If you have questions and you want to kind of have more of a back and forth discussion about it, the best option would be to reach out to any of the project team members, not to put you guys on the hook, but you really are the ones who kind of know the best. You can reach out to Superintendent Osai first, absolutely, or you could also attend that listening session where it's a little bit more of an informal opportunity, and that again is March 18th, Monday evening, 7 to 8:30 at the Middle School Media Center.
And the final thing I would say before asking you to stay for the next board agenda item, just it'll be really short, is that if people like something that you've heard, we would love to hear that as well. We often only hear from people, we sometimes worry that we only hear from people that don't like it, and that there's a huge other group out there that's just thinking, well, they know I think it's okay. Well, we don't, actually. And so if people like something you've heard and would let us know, we'd be grateful. If you have a concern or something you think we're not thinking about, let us know. Thank you. We're going to move on.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, members of the board.
So I've lost my agenda, but I know what's next. And what's next on the agenda is a discussion of one of our policies, which has to do with policy found at 209.1. That's the board's email policy. So I want everybody to know that the board has a policy that we do not respond substantively to emails or Facebook or texts. We are happy to talk with people, but if we respond substantively to a concern, we run the risk of violating the open meeting law, because you can violate the open meeting law in a serial way if you're expressing any thoughts in that way. So we're happy to say thank you for your concerns. We've heard you, we're listening. But anything substantively, you get on the phone with us or somebody else and just understand that's why we're not responding in a substantive way. Okay? Thank you. Mary just went to a session where she was reviewing our open meeting requirements. And I just want to know if there's anything I missed in that quick summary that you think we should add.
Well, actually, I think this has actually come up in the past, so it's a good opportunity to just share with the public that when there are 4 of us board members together, we have to provide notice to the community. If there are 4 of us together and we are discussing board business, that's important. You might see 4 of us somewhere together, but that's not a problem in and of itself. If we're discussing board business, we have to provide the community with notice of that. You all have the opportunity to hear what we are discussing, to learn what we're going to be discussing ahead of time. And so, for example, that's why at a listening session, there's never more than 3 of us there. Because if we were to have 4 of us there, that would violate the open meeting law. No, we could never have 7 of us at a listening session unless it is something more of a formal meeting. And I know that there's been some misunderstandings about that in the past, but please know again that doesn't mean that we are not listening. That doesn't mean we are not taking in your feedback, sharing it with each other. It just means that we can't operate more than 4 of us at a time.
So now if you feel free, or stay, it's all up to you. Thank you so much for your time and your energy tonight. We really appreciate it. So moving to a different topic, we're going to talk for a minute about board professional development. And Mary, you're going to present on that.
Okay, so I have mentioned this in a couple of other board meetings, but we all decided together that we, as part of our professional development work that aligns with the district's mission and the strategic plan, is that together we are going to read Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And Other Conversations About Race. This is by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. And this book was selected with some guidance and input from Superintendent Osai and Dr. Patrick Duffy, and they will be helping us along with some other folks from the district as we engage in this work. And so if anyone wants to read along with us out there in the community, I wanted to kind of share with you all what I was kind of thinking about timeline for how we would break this up and when we would do it. I was, Nancy and Superintendent Osai, I believe, are okay with this proposed plan here, but you want me to talk about the details? Is to do, to complete reading of Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is the definition of terms. Part 2 is titled Understanding Blackness in a White Context. I know that we have a lot of reading right now, research on sleep, for example. So thought we would delay this out a little bit and do this towards the end of April. Maybe a pre-meeting where we could do this discussion before our April 22nd meeting. And then we would move on to Part 3, Understanding Whiteness in a White Context, by mid-May. And then the final parts, Beyond Black and White and Breaking the Silence, parts 4 and 5. We could do that as a wrap-up and kind of considering everything together at a board retreat, which we often do in June. So I don't know if anybody has any issues with that. I can email this to everybody so that you have it. I'm happy to do that. I will email you for information only. Please do not respond to that email lest we violate open meeting law. But if that works, then hopefully we can learn a lot together in the next few months.
Thank you, Mary. I think that sounds like a plan, and we'll do Part 1 and Part 2, and then we can reassess if we need to, or we can move on as presented.
Let's be flexible.
And have some fun. All right, next up is policy. Well, did anybody want to comment on that before I move on? Policy development, first reading policy 709, school transportation and safety, how timely, and 714, fund balances. These are first readings. Are there any comments on policy 709, school transportation and safety?
Chair Gores, you'll see that the policy remain the same. There are no MSBA recommended changes to the policy, as the policy, the way we have it here in St. Louis Park, is just the purpose statement. I've also included the procedure to policy 709, and you'll see there within the procedure, the way that we've designed it, that there are several recommendations from the Minnesota School Board Association. Some of them as simple as changing the word pupil to student, and then there's much larger additions that look more specifically at different transportation considerations that we as a staff will look at as we move forward.
Pardon my ignorance, what's wrong with the word pupil?
Director, you got me. You know what? I'm not sure why the Minnesota School Board Association recommended that change. I can certainly look into that.
Don't strain yourself.
No.
I was just curious.
I'm going to guess it's about what I call parallel construction, that other policies are using the same word as student and they're trying to be consistent. I'll just make the guess. And when you bring it back to us, Aston, just if you want us to adopt all the changes, well, we don't adopt the procedures, but if you're good with that, they'd be good for us to know. And if you think they don't fit our district, then that's for you and your staff to adopt too.
We'll certainly walk through the recommendations that we believe are warranted and those that we may choose not to include at this time.
Thanks. So next up we have fund balances. Oh, sorry, Karen, go ahead.
Just one thing related to the procedure aspect and training. A few years ago, we did have an incident with a neighborhood boycotting the bus because of a lack of racial equity related to the driver and how different colored kids were treated. And so as you go through the procedure part, I know we've been intentional about trying to increase the training with our contractor, Park Adams, but the racial equity work that we've been working on within our school buildings, how a kid's day starts with when they step on the bus. And so it's crucial that we're all singing out of the same page of the choir book on this one. Thank you.
All right, and now we're moving on to policy 714, fund balances.
So with the policy 714, you'll notice that there are a couple of recommendations from the Minnesota School Board Association, one in the area of stabilization arrangements, which really just cause us to take a deeper look at if there are specific arrangements that we are going to make for emergencies or contingencies, that we describe that within the policy language. And then there's also some additional information around creating some specific criteria to review our fund balance. So I would request that the school board look at those two additions from the Minnesota School Board Association as you make your final determination around this policy.
I would propose, since we would be renewing or revising this policy, that we change in the purpose. It makes sense to me that we would be deleting the word new and more. Does that make sense? So that it just reads, the purpose of this policy is to create fund balance classification to allow for useful fund balance reporting and for compliance, et cetera, et cetera.
That makes sense since we adopted in 2011 and it's not new anymore.
I'm just curious, it doesn't require a particular fund balance, but does it mention 6% as a target? Is that recommended by MSBA or?
So MSBA does not give us a specific recommendation around fund balance. Our auditors have made a recommendation, and I would ask that the board take that into consideration as you all make your final policy language here. So MSBA specifically does not provide a recommendation.
But the auditors recommended 6%?
I believe the recommendation from the auditors is higher than 6%. I don't have that percentage off the top of my head.
I believe at the last Financial Advisory Committee, and I don't know if Mary or Patricia can correct me, we were talking about 8%. Now, I'm not sure where that was, exactly where that was coming from.
I think that, Patricia, you should probably clarify this, but it's my understanding that districts can vary on this anywhere from 4% to 12%. Seems to be, there's not really a norm for this, is there?
What I'd like to do is just review some criteria with Finance Advisory Committee. I think it'd be rare to see a 4% fund balance, and I think 6 is fairly low. So I think it's something that's worth looking into. But this new policy, as it's written, does request that the school board review annually at least the sufficiency of whatever fund balance criteria you put into place. So this would allow for us to do that in a way over time, so we wouldn't have to rush the work by May 25th or by March 25th.
Yeah, it calls a minimum fund balance and a target of 6% in the unreserved general fund balance, which we've had for years without an incident, and so I personally don't feel compelled to rush a change, and I think with new auditors, and given Patricia and the auditors and the finance committee a chance to look at it, and the question I would ask you to think about for our next meeting is the time for the annual review at the time we do the budget, or is it a different time? Because that would be good for us to think about and then flag ourselves too, so it comes up on an agenda. Great, we're up to the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody wants to remove for discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mary, is there a second? Seconded by Ann. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up is the action agenda. It is recommended that the school board approve the selection of MMKR as the school district audit firm. Is there a motion? Moved by Karen, is there a second? Second by Ken, is there any discussion? Joe?
I saw that one.
I was just going to again thank Patricia for engaging in this work. I think it is a great time and a great selection, so thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Thank you to Patricia and to the Financial Advisory Committee for looking over this as well. And I think it's a good firm that we're going with. Not that we had any problems with Baker Tilly, but in terms of the thorough examination of vendors and the background that this group has in other school districts, which is much more extensive than what Baker Tilly has, and the fact that we've had Baker Tilly for some time now, I think it's a good time to make a change, and it seems like a good firm to go with. So, thank you.
And I would add the price is right. It's better. Yep.
One thing is that I had to look back, but this is the firm that 287 uses, and we did just receive an audit report in 287 like 2 meetings ago, and I wanted to say that it was excellent, and it was very it was user friendly from a non-expert perspective, so I appreciated that. So thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Anybody opposed?
We were
Karen?
talking about unqualified opinions.
Yeah, I know.
what those meant. And,
Clean, it's clean. All right, it carries 7-0, thanks. Communications and transmittals. I saw the first half of The Sound of Music because I had to go do parent duty after that, but they're at an age. But it was fantastic. I'm always so impressed with what the choir does. There was some amazing talent that was doing that performance, and it just, you know, we've all talked about what our favorite thing is. I think Jim said one of his has to do with band, the district band concert. One of my favorite things is the senior choir recital that comes up in May. And boy, did they set the stage well for some of the amazing singers that we're going to hear in May at the senior choir recital. So I want to thank all of them, and John in particular, for the good work on that.
So I'm not sure if Jim wanted to talk about this, but I attended the Pops concert this year as well. And it was a ton of fun, and they played, the theme was 60s and 70s rock. Ooh. And so if you haven't heard a high school band play ABBA or Led Zeppelin, you have super missed out. But in addition to just the fantastic music and work that Steve Schmitz did, our nominee or Minnesota Teacher of the Year nominee here in the district, I wanted to give a shout out to our students, because the 9th grade band started playing YMCA. And as if it was on cue and they had discussed it ahead of time, the upper class students in the band who were sitting down in front waiting for their turn to play flew their hands in the air to make the YMCA hand motions. And as a parent of a 9th grader who was sitting in the back, to see that kind of support that the upperclassmen gave to the freshmen who were playing at first, it just was really heartwarming. And I think that it speaks so much to the culture of St. Louis Park Schools and the culture of Steve Schmidt's program and how supportive they all are of each other. It was just a great night for many reasons, but I just wanted to give that shout out to our students.
Actually, I had to miss it because of a work emergency, but
You
Led
really
Zeppelin
missed it.
even. I'll have to catch it on tape.
Immigrant.
Last time we were here, I talked about the DECA competition and the state competition that took place last weekend. And St. Louis Park did well. They have 2 go to nationals. And unfortunately, my daughter is not one. She went to the finals, but she didn't make it through to the top 5 or 6. So. But she had a great time. It's a great experience for all kids. They should really consider doing the DECA if you have any kind of business acronym, or if you even think that you want to have fun with a bunch of kids talking about business stuff.
So Ken, I just want to reiterate, your daughter made it to state with DECA, right?
Yes. Yes, she,
How
her
exciting.
first time
Awesome.
out for DECA, and she made it to state. So then she actually got first place going into the final competition, but she didn't finish first. Still a proud dad. We're still fine with that.
Right, I just want to thank everybody. It was a long meeting. Thank you all for staying with us, and it was a good meeting, and I was just so appreciative for all the, particularly the stop committee and all their good work for us, and how they hung in there with us through all our questions, and Aspen and Sarah, awesome job with that, so thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Ann. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. All in favor? Aye. Aye, aye. We're adjourned at 7:00.